in their relative quarantine situations.
Oh God, slowly growing insane.
Yeah,
Slowly growing a beard, slowly growing insane.
Yes.
perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Clint, how are you? Have we spoken before, Clint?
I don't think we have. No. I'm purely a Scout Tafoya hanger-on in this context.
Wow.
I know. It's sad.
This has been. I am. By the way, are we recording?
We are now. Yeah.
Oh wow, it's.
We can start it whenever we want.
No, the thing that I think scare any filmmaker would be like, waking up and reading really, really bad reviews of your movie.
Mm.
I'm so much more proud of the bad reviews of this movie than I am the good reviews, and I hate. I don't know if that's horrible or bad or some weird reflection on me, but like they're really awesome bad reviews. Like they're angry, like super angry.
Which that's the thing I don't get. Like if you're not on the movie's wavelength, then fine. But then again, at least you're inspiring passion in people.
That's true. I mean,
yeah, they're mad. They're like they're mad at themselves, and this is disgusting. And the whole movie is a mess, and it's about nothing. And Tom Hardy's worst performance of his life. If I had nothing to do with this movie, I would be just waiting so desperately to start it. Like, this is great press. It's awesome. Yeah. Richard Roper's review is incredible.
Oh, wow. I gotta look at that.
Yeah. It's really funny. And I don't know, like, when you look at the Rotten Tomatoes, when you look at Rotten Tomatoes and you see the little like their little profile picture, it kind of makes it even better when you see like Richard Roper's profile picture.
Smiling face.
Yeah. And it's just like the most noxious, disturbing character dragging you through one appalling scene after another. Like, this is everything I could have ever dreamed of. So there's yeah.
I'll say this. I'm a Chicago-based critic, and so I share a lot of screening rooms with Richard Roper for like years. We have never exchanged a single word to each other.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. So I have nothing, by the way, this is nothing any disrespect.
Yeah, no, not at all.
People. I just think it's really funny because I didn't know this whole time. I thought I just made this cute little movie about Tom Hardy and diapers. I had no idea that it would incite such vitriol. Like
that's
well, especially coming off the back of Venom, which has like Hardy's weirdest performance before this, and people were on board. And so, what changed?
Right. I still need to see Venom, to be fair. But I hear that it is extremely strange by any even conventional measures of Tom Hardy in a commercial film.
There is a scene in Venom where he just manically just goes into a restaurant and dives into a lobster tank. And Capone to me felt like 100 minutes of him being in that lobster tank in the best possible way.
I'm proud.
Joining us is Mr. Josh Trank. Welcome to COVID-EODROME, everybody. We were recording for a few days earlier. I am extremely happy to have Josh Trank on here. I've been following Josh Trank since, of course, his debut, Chronicle. And then afterwards, he produced the similarly divisive, but I think quite impressive, Fantastic Four movie. I believe that was in 2014, 2015.
2015. August.
And I have been waiting with bated goddamned breath for his next film because I knew that whatever it was would double down on the sensibility that had to be filtered through, on the one hand, an incredible studio budget, and on the other, a screenwriter's vision. This one was going to be 100% pure Trank.
Pure Trank.
We've got it finally. The movie is Capone, starring Tom Hardy, Matt Dillon, Linda Cardellini, and Kyle MacLachlan doing an incredible turn as Al Capone's doctor. This is a movie about Capone in his waning years. He's suffering from dementia, from untreated syphilis. It is a grotesque movie, much to its purpose. It is a confrontational movie, but it is also a beautiful movie and a quite serene and empathetic study of what happens to us when we are dying and the things that we used to look for comfort as acknowledgments of our presence in the universe are failing us. So, Josh, I cannot say enough good things about this movie. I
Thank you.
love this movie.
Thanks, man.
Thinking about it since I watched it last week, and I just like I'm psyched that the response is so nuts because if it continues and whatever the outcome is, I get to then make a video essay about it, and I am ready.
Yeah,
pure unloved fodder. Yeah,
absolutely. I cannot. Like, I really think you did an incredible, impressive job here, and I just want to tell the people what they missed.
Thanks, Scout. It means a lot, man. Like, I've been a big fan of yours and following you ever since Patton Oswalt tweeted the Unloved diary that you did on Big Fan, which is, it's my first real movie that I worked on way early on, my early 20s, and it was like that movie was film school for me, and it's the film that every once in a while, I'll encounter someone in a conversation, or I'll see online, or in real life, where I mention Big Fan, and just and somebody's like, "Wait, you mean the movie with Patton Oswalt about the Giants fan?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you worked on that," and it's just so cool. And I think it speaks to the power of how cinema finds you.
Yeah,
there's so many movies that, this, I'm going to go off on a little detour, but I've been bringing up the movie Barton Fink a lot in a lot of the interviews that I've been doing. Because it's one of my favorite films of all time, and it's a movie that I love to have any opportunity to plug. But I discovered that movie when I was about 9 years old. It was taped off video in my dad's closet, which there were many treasures of cinema on VHS in my dad's closet, and I found it. It just he would tape on 8-hour long play like multiple movies onto a single tape, and he would write on it in pen like what movies were on each tape. That's awesome. And I think there was some other movie before it, and that's why I ended up watching why I ended up watching it after the fact. And it just stuck with me my whole life. And I rewatched it. I've grown up with that movie. And if I were to just imagine the Coen brothers, making a movie like that, which it obviously did what it did in the critical rounds, and as far as like premiering at the, Cannes Film Festival and getting that sort of like a reception. But obviously it was no winner in the box office. I don't believe that it was a movie that on like a broad a critical level got as the kind of accolades that it probably received from the more high-minded critics and from the European crowd. But how would the Coen brothers expect a movie like that to then have such a lifelong impact on like a kid? Yeah. Where it would like set them off on a course in their life where they would just dedicate every, fiber of their being into wanting to like somehow recreate that feeling that they had from that movie, like there's so many, for instance, like, how many times have you ever been to a library where you picked up a book? Like when I picked up a Lord of the Rings when I was in middle school before the movies came out, I picked it up at the library. How long it had been sitting on those shelves for, J.R. Tolkien, who obviously was like a massive impact on literature and culture, but like Lord of the Rings was not famous the way that it was before the movies came out.
Right.
But I picked up that book. Nobody led me to it. And it was, when did Lord of the Rings come out? In the 1940s?
Like
was it finally published?
Maybe?
Or the 50s?
Because it was like a post-World War II thing, I think.
Yeah. So it was published in the early 50s and, like decades and decades and decades. Again, lifelong effect on my psyche. These are things that people pick up after the fact. This movie is just coming out right now. I remember when Big Fan came out. It came out, it got good reviews at Sundance, and then it kind of was released via a distributor. It was in a few theaters. Not a lot of people saw it. And we kind of just moved on with our lives. And I still run into people to this day who not just remember the movie, but love it and like watch it over and over and over again. And it means so much to them. And that's why like with a movie like this, like if your intentions as a filmmaker are pure and you're making a movie from your heart, if it's divisive, if it is like, you know, whatever the reaction is right away, it's not about right now. It's about 10 years from now.
Absolutely.
You know, somebody's going to pick up this movie. It's going to mean something to them in some way that I could have never predicted. So, you know, it was really cool to connect with Scout. I mean, this was a while ago. This must have been, man, back in, I feel like 2013 or something like that. We've been following each other, but I'm just a really, really, really huge fan of everything that Scout does, and that you by proxy of your admission to apparently hanging on to Scout. Yeah. But just the conversation that I find so rare in quote unquote film Twitter, that being, you know, the discovery of cinema and of those, you know, sort of like dark and uncomfortable films that are just sitting in the shadows waiting to be discovered to mean something to people in a transcendent way.
Absolutely.
You know?
I mean, I was talking to my good friend Spencer Lindeman a little while ago. He saw me talking about the movie and he said, "Oh, I'm so excited. I really love Fantastic Four. I can't wait to see what this looks like." And we were talking about, like, basically it strikes me that you're making movies that should have been released in 1978 for us to rediscover on VHS. Like, they have this beautiful kind of longevity to the ideas behind them. That basically, this isn't a movie that's going to age like so much today will. You know, it doesn't have crazy CGI and it doesn't have moral ideas that we're sort of still inventing. And it's not about, you know, it is a movie about the long view of history and the life of cinema. You know, in many ways, texturally and in a metatextually, it's a movie that I feel like you're saying, that if you discovered this in a closet on VHS and you watched it, you would be hooked in immediately, because it is so obviously the work of people who had something incredibly specific on their mind. This is not the Capone that we know. This is not the badass Capone. This is not the De Niro. This is a really strange and beguiling study of one of the most famous men in the world coming to nothing. Why did you want to do this? Where did this particular kernel of the idea and this time in his life come from for you?
It's really, I mean, it's an embarrassingly self-indulgent origin in that I didn't set out at any point to in my head to consciously go make an Al Capone movie. It started with me after a few months of sitting in eerie silence following the fallout from Fantastic Four. Sure. As it's like, guess I refer to as the nuclear tweet. You know, I made a tweet. It got me in even worse trouble.
Oh God!
And at that point, what set in was this this phase of just being toxic and unemployable in an objective way by the industry that only 3 years prior I was lucky enough to be brought to the very top of, and that I was involved in the most high level franchise movies with the most high level producers and studio presidents in town. And I essentially, it was the feeling of having the world at my fingertips. And to go from that to eerie silence and nobody wanting to call me, and just sort of living in this sort of like empty vortex, waking up into this empty vortex every morning, without feeling like I had anything to look forward to. At some point, I remember I was sitting outside, chain smoking, which I had at that point had been smoking about 2 packs a day.
Jeez.
And this story I had read years ago at one of my like history binges on people. I had gotten fascinated by Al Capone many, many years ago. I remembered this story about him basically sitting outside in his backyard in Palm Island years after he had been released from Alcatraz, puffing on a cigar, sitting in eerie silence, with nothing but the kind of like fading memories of his heyday haunting him and confusing him. And I just, for me, what was so fresh was the surreal experience of, opening up my phone or opening up my laptop and logging on to Twitter and seeing this sort of like avalanche of stories and major publications, being tweeted about me involved in all these like, fucked up situations, and I'm like causing all this destruction. And, there was a familiarity in the, within those stories where they were familiar to me, but the way that they were written, the hyperbole that was infused in all of these stories about this guy, Josh Trank, who's just this like one man wrecking crew, destroying this movie and causing all these problems and being this like terrible person. It was like reading about a different person who had your name and that you suddenly had no control over your identity as it now belonged to the public. And obviously this wasn't like on a level of super national news. It was actually on CNN. I mean, it definitely was big news at the time. But, again, it's not like I'm Monica Lewinsky. I mean, what Monica Lewinsky is like, that's a totally different level of like, to just sit there and basically have your identity robbed of you for the rest of your life and you can't recover for decades. I mean, what I went through is minuscule, but I got enough of a taste of that for me to sit there and just think about Al Capone and wonder, okay, well, what would it feel like if Al Capone flipped on the radio in that state and hear a radio play about Al Capone starring voice actors who are involved in a plot about, something that he was involved in, but being told in a way that is not at all like he remembered. Like for me, after months and months and months of reading this narrative that was constructed about me, it was hard for me to, it became hard because I sort of didn't know what to believe at that point. I was like, well, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe this is what happened. And I would imagine that it would be so much worse for somebody like Al Capone, because at that point, his name is American myth for consumption. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, I just kept thinking about that. And I just felt enough so that I'd be able to step inside of that story and write about it in a way that I hadn't seen before as a movie fan and as somebody who I take a great amount of therapy and just writing and, like many people do. So I started writing about it, and the further I got into it, I was hooked and I couldn't stop writing about it. And it just continued to just develop and become this actual living, breathing movie with these characters. And, part of why I wrote it the way that I did without any flashbacks, again, this wasn't a conscious decision about this is a movie that I've always wanted to make and I wanted to make it in this way. It's because what I was going through at that time, being alone at my house and just contending with these confusing memories that I had, I wasn't experiencing a flashback, like a cut back to that. Like it was all so hazy and I felt like these people were still present with me on some level. So I wanted to write it from an experiential standpoint that I think it would have felt like if I was Al Capone, or if the audience were Al Capone. And the resulting document was a script that, therein lied the mantra that the movie itself had dementia, or the movie has dementia, and which became our guiding principle creatively as, we built up a crew and started circling out our cast.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the interesting things about it too, is that you really, really feel like you feel like you've got syphilis right there with Al Capone. But in the most fascinating way, but I think that's one of the reasons why, obviously the reviews are so divisive, is because a movie that makes bold choices like that and doesn't sort of back away from it and doesn't compromise, will divide people. And I think that's something that's really, I find really valuable, even if there are moments where I do want to give it another look to sort of see what I was missing the first time, but I think that's another thing that's really valuable about this, is that there's like rewatch value to it.
Was there
Thank you. Oh, well, I just want to say, Clint, what's interesting is back to the reviews. What's funny, and I think why I'm not hurt by any of these reviews and why it only, I think, that like validates the whole existence of the film in the first place, is that everything that's being described in anger by critics who don't like the movie, they're describing extremely intentional aspects of the movie. Mm-hmm. If they were grading this movie, giving it a bad grade for unintentionally, like, for things that were miscast, or like these actors were miscast, or this whole thing fell apart because of a lack of intention. Like, these were all very intentional choices. So they're either going to freak you out for the right reasons, like that they were all done for a reason. Like, nothing in this movie was done without intention.
Right. That's the thing that baffles me, is that I couldn't imagine someone thinking that there's unintentional comedy, for instance, in Capone. Right. Like there is an inherent absurdity to everything that's going on, including Hardy's like balls to the wall performance. And it's very curious to me that people are like, oh my God, that is a mistake. And I'm like, it's not though. You just maybe don't dig it, but this happened for a reason. Like, this is absolutely on purpose.
Right. And I think it's just like, by the fact that there's a carrot in Tom Hardy's mouth and he's wearing diapers, like, the weird humor of the movie is as intentional as anything. I mean, again, I like just point back to some of my biggest influences in my life, like Barton Fink. You watch a movie like that, all the conversations between John Goodman and John Turturro when they're sitting there awkwardly in his apartment. I mean, I've shown that movie to so many friends over the course of my life. Most people don't really get it, or they're not entirely sure if they're allowed to laugh with it, because they don't know if it's supposed to be intentionally funny, which I think is a thing that is fine. Like, not everybody's gonna like get something the same way, but I think that there are a lot of people who watch movies and they need to feel that the movie is giving them permission to laugh along with it in order to know that it is supposed to be funny.
Right. There's also a sort of a cinema sensification of the whole thing too, where people need to feel like they can outsmart the movie. And that's one thing that's like really, really obnoxious to me.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I kind of forgot about that, but that whole CinemaSins, honest trailers and all that sort of culture, which is what it is. It's fine. Like, I have a hard time hating on anybody who has like found a way to earn a living for something they're passionate about in the way that makes sense, that generates a following. It is what it is. I'm not hurt by it. Right. But I think that I wish that there was some sort of dueling authority or dueling, I don't know, conversation that can help sort of like usher in this new gen of film fans, so that they can understand that like, this is not how we should be appraising films or the quality of films. Right. We should be looking at it with a much, like this is, or like, so-and-so ranked, like, if we're really sitting here like ranking David Lynch movies, that defeats the whole purpose of even watching a David Lynch movie.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's everybody wants their art to be able to be like very, very specifically quantified and qualified. Right. It's that, rather than letting the movies just do what they're supposed to, I think everybody needs everything in a box. And I think that maybe because there's just too much information and there aren't video stores anymore. And so we have to find some way to keep track of all the information, but it does defeat the purpose of art. We can't beat it. It exists to enrich our lives.
Right. I remember back in the day, conversations with film fans were like, there was we had growing up in LA, there was Vidiots and Laser Blazer and Tower Video, which to this day was my favorite video store. It was on Sunset. It was across the street from Tower Records. And even though it had the name of Tower on it, and it was like the yellow and red, it was just a tiny little video store. It was the best. And they had all of their sections, just like Vidiots of like, Cronenberg and Cassavetes and all that. And you would wander into these stores and strike up conversations with other people in the aisles who were just like also there for some reason, thumbing through like Cassavetes, and you would just talk to them and you'd have these like really informative conversations where you would learn things that you didn't know about because you couldn't just like go Google these things. Like not all the information was out there. And you'd like in a lot of these video stores too, they would have these great book sections like in the corner, and you'd like buy a book and learn about some filmmaker's filmography, and it was all very positive. All the conversations were like all informative and educational, and there was just a passion to want to share what you knew with other people. And I sadly find that like because of the internetization of our film community, like it's turned into this pissing contest that is so negative. And like, again, I myself am extremely guilty of getting, having a couple, one too many shots of bourbon, going on Twitter and like shitting very immaturely and rudely on stuff that other people love. But like, I only have myself to blame for that. And I've always gone out of my way after the fact to apologize for it. And that's not to save face. I really, like, as I'm saying right now, I find that there's something so nefarious and fucked up about being mean about something that people really, really, really love, whether it's mainstream or not. Right. So again, just to like point out, like, I understand that it's hypocritical for me to be saying that, like, I am guilty of it, but we have to just sort of point out the toxic nature of film Twitter in and of itself. And that, I again, like, if certain critics or certain people were more open-minded to my movie, or were less like competing for who can come up with their better outsmarting hot take on the film, like, maybe I wouldn't hold that. I probably wouldn't be as harsh on these folks as far as like me feeling like they're contributing to a toxic environment, but they really are. Like, there are a lot of these people who are very much adults, who are very educated, who have gone to college, who have a wealth of knowledge of film. And rather than, every day sort of like waking up and saying like, okay, well, I'm older and I have a following of people who are much younger than me, who have Twitter handles that don't have their names on them, like us in the verified, thing. Like, these people don't have their names. A lot of them are very young and impressionable, and they're learning snark as opposed to film. Like, and it's just, I don't know. Like, I mean, I'm very curious, sort of like, what your average 14-year-old aspiring filmmaker is going to do in 10 years from now. I mean, we will be surprised on some level. I mean, I'm excited for it. But anyway.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting thing also, just because the very idea that you and me and Clint are right now talking through this thing that nobody had heard of 3 months ago before. Like, I just feel like new forms and all that are going to be very interesting. But you're very right that the film culture right now, I wonder what of it will survive in that way, whether it's the movies or the criticism. So much of this is all online now, and we have to kind of learn in that way. So it'll be fascinating to see what of this moment survives, if anything.
Right.
I quite agree with you there. No, you're right. And the thing is, I think, you've had a harder time of it than a lot of people. I think that people sort of looked at you as kind of a Rorschach test for everything that happens in film right now, where you were given this, the kind of the big comic book thing. And I think people,
right.
Whatever their feelings were about it, I think everybody was given license, in a sense, by the general consensus to take their frustrations, whatever they were, out on you and your movie. And that was the way that it was for years. And even now, I mean, we have these useless lists of like ranked superhero movies. It's like, God, nothing means less than ranked superhero movie lists. It doesn't have anything to do with film craft. It doesn't have anything to do with criticism. It doesn't have anything to do with anything or anybody's subjective experience. Even it's conjecture and opinion about something that was by default in the same movement.
Well, it's also a big part of it is, I think, feeding the algorithm for financial reasons, which I've just come to sort of accept. Like, if you're putting out, something to click on that is something that people are into. Like, I love superhero movies. I love MCU ranked. Well, I want to see what they had to say about that.
Right.
And it's like, it's feeding a mindless thought loop, but at the same time, like, I get it. But what I wish is that sort of like click-based economy of a lot of these sites, that there was a balance where they were putting out those clickbaits in order to generate to sort of like balance that out with more thoughtful content on their sites at the same time.
I think,
and you know what I'm saying? Like, but it doesn't seem to be the case. I think that it's just sort of like just feeding a fan machine of just arguing and debating over the minutia of like, well, is the first Avengers like 3 or number 4? Is it really better than that? And it's just like, why are we talking about it?
No, it's nonsense. It's a white noise machine that will, I hope, be left in the dust by all this. I wanna get into, speaking of minutia, specific things that I really, really loved about this, that I want to know about, like what conversations you were having. Something like I want to talk about the Kyle MacLachlan performance, because I was like extremely moved by that. What did you talk to him about to get him into character? Like the best moment in the movie, maybe for me, and it's tough, is him talking to the FBI. That one shot, it's like pre-dawn light, and he's there, and he's just so small before them. Can you tell me about building that performance in that moment specifically?
Mm-hmm. Well, the way that I worked with Kyle on Capone was very much in just a literal interpretation of this character as a doctor who's there for the family and has a apprehension to push his medical opinions too hard on this particular family, because of just there's a bit of danger if you're trying to push your opinion too much on somebody whose last name is Capone. Mm-hmm. So that's why in all the scenes with him, when he's talking to May or Fonz, there's a little bit of like kind of a, he's like sort of engaging them with a gentle sort of appeal. He's appealing to them in a very gentle way, so that he's not, he doesn't want to push too hard. As far as just the core of this kind of uncomfortable moment by the swamp when he meets up with the FBI and they imply, him being let off the hook in exchange for something, and he obviously seems like really deeply troubled by it. Well, first and foremost, his character is not based on the real personal doctor of Al Capone. This is a composite of, just this kind of a character. The movie itself is an impressionistic film that is much about our perceived identity of Al Capone as it is Al Capone's own perception of his identity within the movie. So there's a lot of there's a lot of meta-ness in that, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So anything that I'm saying about this character or backstory is not based on the real character, who by all accounts was extremely loyal to the Capone family. What we were going for, the Deep Dark Secret, was along the lines of the sort of Roy Moore of Alabama thing. Sure. The sort of, self-righteously an adult self-righteously engaging in emotional sexual relationship with minors, and being discovered, and what guilt would come with that. And I think it's a very uncomfortable. I don't think there's anything more uncomfortable or frightening for an adult or a human being to sort of play on that history as an actor, because that's like ultimately one of the ugliest things that anybody could do. Mm-hmm. So it was like really kind of incredible with Kyle to just sort of see how he would emotionally contend with that guilt that's never spoken of, and to just sort of like just to play that feeling and know that he's caught and he has no way out. So yeah, I mean, it's ultimately there's nothing deeper beyond that, but that was what we were playing with.
Right. It plays beautifully.
On a related note, when it came to sort of, of course, and the impressionistic sort of nature of the film and the playing with history, I'm very curious about the Tony character, because as far as I remember, there's no specific real world analog. So sort of what was your thinking behind including that character and sort of the implied illegitimate child of Al Capone, and sort of where that fit in with his character?
Well, again, I mean, in regard to this being an impressionistic film that has theories of its own, and I had read in many different books, and again, like we can jump into that and try to pull up all of the resources for this, but there have been many implications that Al Capone had illegitimate kids, and I feel like there's a pretty big responsibility that one has if they're going to take a leap and accusing somebody who really lived of having an illegitimate child when there's no direct evidence of it. But I felt that as sort of a film that worked as an impressionistic composite of a mob boss in a specific time and place, where it isn't a stretch of the imagination to assume that he would have fathered illegitimate kids and that others like him did the same thing.
Right.
I thought that it was an important theme to incorporate into this movie, where the evidence doesn't exist, and at the same time, children born out of wedlock in those circumstances are also treated as if they don't exist.
Right.
And that, how often do we really see those real life stories examined in this kind of a movie where, somewhere out there might be somebody, I have a couple of friends in my life, one in particular who it's not worth, obviously it's just, I'm not going to name any names, but I have a very, very, one of my closest friends who didn't know her real father until she was 20 years old. And the discovery of who it was, it was a big deal, right? And she didn't get the opportunity to really know him until he was on his way out. And, it was a tough situation. It was very complicated. And there's a lot of people out there who deal with that, and it's not anything that they want to advertise or talk about, but for the sake of cinema and being alone and watching a film, to connect with that in sort of in some kind of way, I felt was important. And it just felt like a metaphor for his lost fortune on some level, and for a life that he could have had but opted for a very different kind of a life. So the answer is an extremely pretentious one. I'm sorry to say.
No, those are the best.
No, it's a good answer. Yeah,
we need the pretentious answers. No, I think it's funny you talk about the sort of the ways into this character metaphorically, and you do so much work in such little time. It's not a long film. It's not a film that really spends more time than it has to on anything. You know exactly who everybody is and what they represent basically right away. The only one that remains kind of cagey towards the end, but that's on purpose, is the Matt Dillon character. You don't get a firm grip on who he is and what he means to Al Capone, but that's the beauty of it, is because he is the sort of front for the deteriorating understanding of his surroundings.
Right. And also somebody whose alleged fate tied so directly to conscious choices that this Al Capone made in his past, and when confronting him with it, Matt Dillon, rather than talking about the betrayal, he prefers to reinforce back to Al Capone that regardless of what happened between us, you're a good guy. And it's how you treat your family. And there's guys off the street that are, going to celebrate your name for forever after this. He just reinforces the sycophantic nature of people like that Al Capone would have surrounded himself by, that even if you kill me in this life, it's fine, man, because you're the man, you know, like, don't worry about it. I probably had it coming anyway.
Right.
You know, I'll let you kill me again. I'll let you kill me again if you think that's what's necessary.
Right.
Okay. Go ahead, Clint. Sorry.
Okay. Well, also at the center of all that, you know, because we're talking about all these very, you know, very important issues of family and reflection and everything, but it is all anchored by a central performance that I found fascinatingly wordless. You know, so much is guttural and bestial about him. Like Tom Hardy sounds like he swallowed Nick Nolte half the time, and that's brilliant.
Amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah. It's
that's terrific.
Yeah. No. So, I mean, when you were crafting the screenplay and working with Tom, like, what were sort of were there lines that you wanted to toe in terms of like how broad and how big to make Capone, or were there times when you wanted to rein it in?
No, it was, I mean, that's what I love about Tom. It's like, no, mate, go big or go home.
Yeah.
We're here to make a statement.
Right.
You know, like, and I, to me, hey man, I'll live and die by that. We're here to make a statement.
Yeah.
You know, if it's something that is unpleasing to you, then I'm sorry, you could look the other way, but we're here to make a statement, you know? So it was, as far as like the, you know, the bombacity of all these choices, like that's what we were there to do.
Yeah.
It was written in the script, and there were days where we would show up and look at the scene, and when we would block the scene before setting the cameras and getting into lighting and having everybody go into last looks, we would often just run through the scene and the blocking of it as a way to see if we could break the scene. If the scene wasn't working as it was scripted on as I had it scripted, which is something that is very important to be open-minded about, because you want to see, like, is there a better way to do this scene? Sometimes we would find it, and sometimes we would end up doing crazy things that we didn't expect. I mean, one really fun moment that I remember that was just like, it was so funny. Like, the scene in the film when it's in the second half of the movie when Fonz is sitting at dinner after his stroke. The whole family is there. Catherine Narducci is like spoon feeding him mushed up carrots and stuff, and family's there. And then Gino walks into the room and like triggers Fonz and his like memory of what he had seen in his sort of like that inner fantasy interlude he walks into. Mm-hmm. And he's terrified by Gino. Nobody knows why, but he knows why, and we know why. And Gino doesn't even know why, but he knows why. And in the script, the way that I had it written was everything was the same leading up to that moment. Gino's cutting into the steak, and then he's doing so in a way that looks a little bit more violent, but in a way that only Fonz sees and nobody else does. And then finally, it culminates with Fonz yelling at him and cussing at him in Italian. And in the script, they basically calm him down, and a close-up of a pill fizzling into water, and then it cut to a scene where he's being put to into his bed by everybody. So in the movie, it all plays up to that moment. But what happens is Tom jumps out of the chair, lands on his face, and before he does so, he screams, "Save yourselves!" Right? So the reason that happened is we walked onto the set, and like when you're filming a movie, you're shooting a lot of scenes out of order mostly, and so sometimes when on the call sheet you like in the back of your mind, like, okay, that scene 47B or whatever, that's going to be up at like after lunch, but then you get there and you're like, oh yeah, we're doing this scene. Oh yeah, and then so we walk onto the set, Tom and I and all the actors and stuff. And it was just, kind of blocking, okay, Rosie, I think Rosie should be here, and Linda over here, and one Noel across the table. And then I look over and Tom is like, he's got the smile on his face. He's like, mate, I don't know. I got an idea. I'm like, yeah, what is it? And he goes, all right, let's just look at the scene. He comes in, and I just saw him, Gino, do some naughtiness, right? I'm like, yeah. He goes, I want to end up on that floor. And then I was just like, I knew exactly what he meant because it made sense. Like, he wants to escape. Like that, it's not about him like yelling or, being accusational towards Gino. It's he wants to get the fuck out of there.
Yeah.
And he's going to end up on the floor. So then as soon as he said that, I'm like, no, yeah, that's it. We have to be like that. It's just such a great finale to the scene. So I was like, yo, Peter, we're going to have, Tom's going to launch out of the chair. He's going to land on his face. So we need a mat. And why don't we set up B camera over in the back to get a wide so we can get it. Right. And then that's how it ended up. But it's just stuff like that. Like we look at a scene and go like, is this crazy enough? I mean, what else are you going to do at the end of the day when you're dealing with the kind of themes that you're dealing with? So, like I said, it's a go big or go home type of thing.
Right.
I got to thank you, man, for making the time to talk to us. This was a fucking blast. The movie.
Thank you.
So good. I'm going to, as soon as I hang up, I get to go review it. So I'm really excited.
Enjoy. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you guys. It really means a lot. And like I was saying, I'd love to schedule just, after this, just some talks and stuff, just talk about movies we love and stuff like that. And it would be a lot of fun.
Sure. Yeah.
Always a supporter, man.
You're the best, Josh. Thank you so much.
You guys.
Great to meet you, man.
Let's go.
Thank you. Good to meet you, Clint.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, guys.